Hi, my name is Robin Wong. I'm a photographer based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I have with me the Sigma DP2 Quattro. I want to share my thoughts on using this camera in this video. Let's do this! Before we dive in, here are some important disclaimers. I have no association or connection to Sigma. This is not my camera. I borrowed this from my friend Rippy, and I do have to return this camera to him after this. This is not a review. I don't intend to do a full review for this camera. It has been around for almost 10 years, and it is quite an interesting camera. I just want to share my thoughts and experience having used this camera for my shutter therapy sessions, the things that I like and dislike about this Sigma DP2 Quattro. Taking a closer look at this Sigma DP2 Quattro, it is quite an unusual camera. It features an unconventional image sensor design. Instead of using the typical Bayer filter design, where the pixels are divided into red, green, and blue after the filtering in the singular layer, this Sigma features their own proprietary Foveon sensor. This Foveon sensor has 3 layers of pixels. The top layer records the full 19.6 megapixels, accompanied by the 2 bottom layers recording 4.9 megapixels of resolution each. Sigma claims that all these layers combined, this will produce excellent unparalleled resolution, and it will also give better color tonality and depth. Well, how true is this? I'll just have to bring this camera out and test it myself. Let's take a look at some photographs first. There are several things that I really like about this Sigma DP2 Quattro. First of all, I love the unconventional design of this camera. It looks totally different from any other cameras out there. I applaud Sigma for being bold and daring in making this unusual design. It looks sleek, it looks minimalist, and most important of all, it looks modern. And yet, the design, while it looks very different from other cameras, it is actually quite functional. Gripping area of this camera is quite substantial, and in terms of handling, I've been using this camera shooting on the streets for at least 2 to 3 hours, and I have no issue handling this camera. But hey, this is actually quite a small and lightweight camera as well. I also really like the layout of the controls, the menu system, where the buttons are placed, the dials, they all make sense, and I can get to the controls and important settings very, very quickly. I can operate this camera very effectively, and it's like I don't even need to spend a lot of time getting to know this camera. That is definitely a plus point. I also really like the image quality coming out from this camera. With an exception, the image quality in good light, shot at ISO 100, it is mind-blowingly good in terms of sharpness, in terms of resolution, the ability to render fine details and really good contrast. This combination of this 30mm f2.8 lens and the Foveon sensor, my goodness, it is actually really impressive. It is sharp from corner to corner, edge to edge, and the sharpness, the level of details this combination of lens and Foveon sensor can produce, man, you have got to see it to believe it. It is incredibly mind-blowing. Like, I understand the appeal of this Foveon sensor. That's what Sigma is trying to push. But unfortunately, the Foveon sensor also comes with some limitations, which we will discuss later. Let's take a look at more photographs. While I really appreciate the ability of this Foveon sensor to render excellent resolution, it does come with some serious restrictions. Number one, poor dynamic range. Even at ISO 100, the base ISO, shooting in RAW, under normal high contrast situations, I can easily get highlight blownouts. Looking at the RAW file, there's no way to recover these highlight clippings, and that is really disappointing because in comparison to the smaller sensor from the first generation Micro Four Thirds system, I have better dynamic range, I have better highlight and shadow recovery, and I'm just expecting better from this Foveon sensor. Number two, poor high ISO shooting. When we get excellent resolution at base ISO, but as we bump up the ISO to say 400, immediately, almost instantly, you lose resolution and you can see high ISO noise everywhere in the frame. I think that's counterproductive of what this Foveon sensor can do. As you go to ISO 800 and 1600, the images come out with so much noise that it looks almost unusable. This is the kind of camera in very limited use case where you do have to stay at base ISO 100 or 200 to get the best out of this Foveon sensor. Anything from ISO 400 or beyond, it is basically best avoided. And number three, very slow processing time. I understand that the Foveon sensor, it has 3 different layers of pixels. It takes time for the camera to combine all these pixels and all this massive information and make it into the RAW file to store into the camera. But the processing time is very worrying. As the camera captures the image, it takes about 10 seconds or more to write into a RAW file, and that's unforgivable. And shot-to-shot performance is also not good. You get serious blackouts, and the slowness of this camera is just not inspiring. I understand that this is not the kind of camera for you to use in an action scenario or fast-paced shooting, but the slowness of this processing time is also making this camera very, very limited in normal shooting scenarios. I can see the appeal and the potential of this Foveon sensor in the Sigma DP2 Quattro camera. All Sigma needs to do is to continue to push their R&D to improve what this Foveon sensor can do, improve the dynamic range and high ISO shooting, at least come close or match what the competition is doing, combined with the excellent resolution and fine details contrast rendering. I believe this will appeal to a much wider audience. In terms of the slow processing, I believe this camera was launched like 10 years ago. So with today's newer updated processing powers and capabilities, the slow processing shouldn't be a problem. I believe this camera will be much faster utilizing today's processing power. Now all Sigma needs to do is just use the latest processor and really push what the Foveon sensor can do, and with better dynamic range and high ISO and retaining the superb, mind-blowingly good resolution, this will be a killer camera. That's all I have to share about this Sigma DP2 Quattro camera. Have you owned one yourself? Do share your thoughts and experience about this camera in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. If you found my sharing beneficial, if you've enjoyed looking at my photographs, please consider buying me a cup of coffee, or you can contribute directly to my PayPal. Links in the description below on how I can do that. Any small contribution will go a long way. It will definitely help me to continue making more content and publish them right here. Until the next one, please go out and take more photographs. Bye-bye.